So what happens now to CPB?
Well, the group is arguing that this move will drastically change the landscape of local news stations and TV and radio across the country. And they argue that without federal funding, it will force smaller news stations that serve rural and smaller communities to ultimately shut down. Here's what the CEO of the group, Patricia Harrison, and president had to say. She said, despite the extraordinary efforts of millions of Americans who called, wrote, and petitioned Congress to preserve federal funding for CPB, we now face the difficult reality of closing our operations. Now, it's important to note that President Donald Trump is declaring this a major victory because, as you mentioned, for decades, Republicans have really tried to push to withhold federal funding for public broadcasting. They've argued and accused stations like NPR and PBS of having alleged liberal bias, and they say that federal funding should not be going towards them. But advocates of public broadcasting say that rural communities in particular really rely on public broadcasting to receive their news about the weather, natural disasters, and what's actually happening in their community. Now, Victor, it's also important to note that some local stations across the country really anticipated some of these changes, and on their end, they have looked and actively searched for other avenues of financial support.
We know that there's been some strong reaction from families that rely on that programming for children, but also the news element. So what's been the reaction from journalists?
Well, journalists across the country have really criticized this decision, and especially advocates of public broadcasting say that this move and this decision is ultimately a direct reflection of Congress and their failure to properly invest in informing the American public. And it's just pretty notable just to see everything changing in real time. And that's why there's a lot of local news stations across the country that have tried to anticipate what the reaction or what the changes will be, and on their end really try to support themselves by finding other avenues of financial support so they didn't have to rely so heavily on federal funding.
Camila DeChalis for us in Washington. Thank you so much.